Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this recording. Thank you so much for being here and for making conscious parenting a part of your parenting and life journey. Thank you for bringing your energy to this platform and to this space, and taking the time to invest in yourself. Today, we are going to talk about family values. Family values is such an important topic. Here's why. Family values are the basis for which you can use to gain cooperation between yourself and your children, the basis through which you can create, implement, and uphold boundaries within your household. Family values actually create a structure, a safety net through which your children can feel safe, can feel connected to you and to your family. Family values create a space for each one of us to feel strong, to feel connected to something. And we can take that strength and that connection out into the world with us, right? If you think about it, if you have a strong set of values, you know really clearly who you are and what is important to you, then it becomes clearer what you need to stand up for, right? When you're out there in the world, it becomes clear what is important to you, what means a lot to you. When you're clear on what your values are, then it is a lot easier to articulate what is important to you, to know what you want to stand up for, to feel connected with your sense of self, because values are that. Values are what is important to us. It's those lines that we don't let crossed, right? We don't let other people cross those lines. And when we're strong with understanding what those values are and being able to articulate what those values are, then it becomes easier for us to stand up for ourselves, right? And to be really connected with who we are, no matter what situation we're put into. And we all want that for our children. I know we do. So let's talk today about family values. Now, here's an interesting thing I've noticed from working with parents, and I think it's a really important distinction. People talk about family values as if that's the value. What do I mean by that? I've heard a lot of parents say, values are really important to us in our family. I want my child to just be a good person who has good values. Well, that's a very confusing statement, because what does good values mean? Really, like if you think about it, if I'm going to ask you, what does it mean for you and your child to have good values? You're all going to give me different answers. And if you're not really clear on what your values are, then you can't transfer those clear values to your children. And so you might tell them, we're a family that has really clear and strong values. But if you're not clear on what those values are, then the translation of what values are to your child will be completely different, or can be completely different, than the way that you interpret what values are, right? The values that are important to you. And so it's a funny, interesting distinction to actually begin to make in our mind. We think values are having human dignity and having integrity, but to someone else, having values is, being strong in their religion. Maybe values can be competition, can be a family value, right? Honesty can be a family value. There's a whole list of family values, and those values will be different from person to person. The reason why they're different from person to person is because each one of us has a different makeup. We each are born with things that are more or less important to us, and that's okay. And one of the important points about creating family values is understanding and knowing that my family values, my values, are going to look different than someone else's values, than another family's values. And guess what? That's okay. Everyone has their own values. They're just different. Now, what happens is when we see somebody behaving differently than the way that we want to behave, or we want our children to behave, then we are really quick to judge and say, like, oh, maybe we would even say they have no values. The thing is, they have different set of values. They may or may not be in touch with their set of values, and that's not something that any of us can judge. But the important thing to understand and recognize is that values is not an adjective. Like values is not describing what the values are. Values is a word. We have to be really clear on what our values are and understand even that values doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really mean anything until we're really clear on what our values are. Values can be accomplishment. A value can be cleanliness. A value can be connection. A value can be cooperation. A value can be friendship. A value can be intelligence, kindness, goodwill, harmony, happiness, hard work, right? Respect for others, personal growth. I'm so sorry. I live in LA and there's sirens everywhere. A value can be tradition. A value can be tolerance. Okay, unity, wisdom. Now, I'm giving a lot of words. I'm throwing out a lot of values. There's a lot more. Some of them may have rung true for you. Some of them may have been like, not so important to me. Guess what? That's okay. The most important thing when it comes to values is that you can recognize and understand which values are most important to you. Because when you're really clear on what your values are, then and only then can you translate them to your children. Here's why. When we're really clear on what our values are, and we're not always, because we think we have good values, things mean something to us. But if we are not taking the time to write down what our values are and make sure that we live in a way where we uphold those values on a daily basis, we are not, then if we can't do that, we're not modeling that for our children, and they may not be as connected with those values. If we want our children to be connected with our values, to live by our values, then we have to be clear on what they are, fully embody them in our actions all the time, which then models them for our children. And also we can then talk to our children about them, model them, talk to them, point out those values, right? In different situations, when we see a character in a TV show using those values, or we can buy books around those values and read them to our children, right? Or when we see our child acting within one of those values, to bring it up and notice it and mention it, right? And let them know that, yes, that is, I love the way that you acted within our value of respect that we have in our family. Now, it's a really important distinction to make, and I said it already, that there may be values that you think are supposed to be important, but you're not actually living by them. You're not upholding them. Now, this could mean one of two things. This could mean, A, that it's actually not a value that's important to you. And by the way, that's okay. It doesn't have to be. That's the thing. A value that was important to you or your family as a child and never resonated with you doesn't have to be your value right now. A value that you think you're supposed to live by, but it's not important to you, doesn't have to be one of your basic values right now. And it's important to be honest about that, because if you're not honest about that, it's going to be very confusing. You won't be living by that value, and it will confuse your child, right? So it's okay to have a different set of values than what you think you're supposed to have, or from other people around you. Because the more you have, the stronger and clearer you are on those values, then and only then can you live by them. Because if you're not clear on them, you're not living by them, it's really confusing. And then you're going to drop the word of, you're going to ask your child to be respectful or expect them to be respectful, but you're not living it, you're not modeling it. It's actually not one of your core values. Maybe it's not one of the core values of your family. And so then we can't expect our child to behave according to that value. Now, here's what's interesting about values. I said I use the word respect and I use the word cooperation, I think already. If respect isn't something that you believe in, okay, it's like you think you're supposed to, but you don't. Actually, when you ask yourself, like, do I really believe in respect? Like, is it really like something that's really important to me? And one way you can ask yourself and know if it is something that's important to you is, if I had, when I think about respect, if someone is disrespectful, how do I feel? Right? Like, or if I behave disrespectfully, how do I feel about myself? Do I feel like I crossed a line? Do I feel really uncomfortable, like I'm crawling out of my skin? That is an amazing way to know what your value is. If you answered yes to those questions, then respect is one of your core values, most likely, because it's something that's really important to you. think just the idea of like not having respect towards other people is just makes you really uncomfortable. Now, let's say it doesn't, and you're like, you know what? Respect actually isn't a really important value to me. That's okay. That doesn't mean that you're okay with speaking disrespectfully to people. It doesn't mean that you're okay with, yelling at people or putting people down. It just might be that a core value is, instead of respect, it's cooperation. Ooh, like when I think about the idea of not cooperating with other people or my kids not cooperating with me, that makes my skin crawl. That makes me really annoyed and upset. That's how you know it's a core value. So it can be that the way that respect is manifested or the way that cooperation is manifested is different, is the same, but the value is different. And that's okay. We just want to be clear on what the value is, because when we go to gain cooperation from our children, if we go to create and implement a boundary within our home, what we use is the family value at the heart of it. Respect is really important in our family. So it's really important that, we get ready for school on time, because respect is really important. And when we are late to school, that's disrespectful to our teachers because we walk in the middle of when they're speaking. So we want to be really sure that we leave for school on time every day. That's a clear boundary for us and our family, because respect is at the heart of it. Does that make sense? Now, if respect isn't the heart, the value, then that's fine. And cooperation is no problem. We need to get out of the house on time for school every day, right? Because we're through cooperating with each other. When we cooperate with each other, we all are on the same page. We're working together. We can get out of the house at the right time every morning. Cooperation is so important in our family because it's our teamwork. It's what makes our family function and work really well, right? So you can still get out of the house at the right time every day, whether you have the core family value of respect or cooperation at the heart and center of it. The most important thing is that you're really clear on what the value is. You dissect that value with your children. You explain it over and over again. You point out that value all the time because that value is so important to you. So how do you choose what values are important to you? The first thing you do is you go through a list of family values. Okay. And I believe I have a list on my Instagram page. If not, you feel free to private message me. You can email me and I will send you a list of family values. You can also Google it and find it online for sure. But what you want to do is you want to go through a list of family values and you want to narrow it down to like 5. And it's really important to narrow it down because you can't have 20 different family values because that's confusing. It's too many to remember. But if you can narrow it down to like 5 or 6, and those are the ones you stick to in your family and you're repetitive about them, then they will become super clear to your children. So the first thing is to figure out what your family values are by going through a list and using your instinct, your intuition to say like, oh yeah, that's really important to me. That's really important. And if you have a list that's more than 5 or 6, then you go back, you narrow it down as much as you can, then you narrow it down again. And you're like, it's less about like, oh yeah, I like that, or that makes sense to me, or I'm supposed to have that value. And it's more of like, if I didn't have that, I get this like pinch inside, right? Like that really uncomfortable feeling. So I know that that's a value that's really important to me. So you choose and you're clear on what values are important to me. Now, if you're parenting with a partner, you might have individual set of values, of core personal values. What you want to do is you want to sit down together and figure out which ones are really essential to you and your family. Okay. Now, when you choose those values, and you may be on very different pages, so you want to work out the values that are important enough to both of you to make it to that list. Okay. And then you both want to be living within those values. So you want to find the ones that are important to your family. And those are the ones you're going to drive home for your children. So it's choosing those values, being really clear on them, super clear, read them over and over again, figure out how in your life you're not living by those values and how you can live by those values. When you have an important, tough decision to make, the question you need to ask yourself is this according to my value, right? When you're behaving a certain way, the question you want to ask yourself is, am I behaving according to my value? And if I'm not, okay, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to figure out how I can behave according to my value. It's so important. And it's such an integral part of living a conscious, balanced life. It actually takes so much of the guesswork out of the way we parent, the decisions that we make. It can make life and living so much clearer, so much more fluid, so much more, calmer and connected. So it is what's important to you, not somebody else. It's making a list and being really, really clear on what your values are, right? If that value is not there, you feel uncomfortable. It's, what do I want? Another question you can ask yourself is, what do I want to pass down to my child? How do I want my child to interact with the world? What's really important to me? What do I want them when they grow up and they leave the house? What do I want them to know and feel inside of them really strongly, so that I'm setting them up, supporting them, giving them the tools to go out into the world and be successful and to be true and clear on who they are. And this is such an important part of having values. It gives us the clarity, the ability to be really clear on who we are, which gives us a strength, a backbone to handle any challenge that comes our way, to use our voice to stand up for ourselves when we need to fight for ourselves, to believe in ourselves. When I'm clear on my values, I know who I am, and nobody else can tell me who I am. Nobody can tell me, how to behave, what to say. Nobody's allowed to speak to me without respect or cooperation, because it's my value. I'm clear on it, and they're not allowed to cross that boundary. The values are what allow us to create those strong and clear boundaries. We want to be really clear on the place of that value within our life, and to be able to explain to our children why those values are so important to us. Okay, everything we do and say are built around those family values, and it's amazing because it gives us a center. It gives us, something to hold on to, something to guide us through the challenging times, right? When there's a hard decision to make, right? Or life feels really, really crazy right now, right? Like, I feel completely out of control. I feel powerless. If I'm clear on who I am and what I stand for, I can allow that to really guide me and help me navigate life and the world. So I hope that was helpful for you. Thank you so much for tuning in for this conversation. Family values are so important. They are what I like to call the heartbeat, at the center of having and creating healthy boundaries within our family and within our lives. And that's a whole nother class about creating boundaries, which I think I have up here, but I maybe will revisit in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you again next week.